Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Ati sukhata dukkhatanang kamanang palang. Okay, so just a full disclosure and a spoiler alert. Today we're going to talk about heaven and hell. Okay. Ajahn Nisabho gave me a choice. Which one do you want to talk about? I'm like, real quick. It was just he and I in the room, but super fast. Heavens. Me, I got it. Heavens. So we'll be going back and forth. And yeah, this is in America, in the West, talking about heavens and hells. The cosmology is not something which really gets talked about in Buddhist circles. Most people coming to meditation centers or monasteries in the West weren't born in a Buddhist culture, and we came to these spaces because we wanted to meditate, had an idea of the mind calming, and then the longer you stay, the more kind of you start to hear and read, and yeah, there is a robust cosmology in every form of Buddhism, Chinese Buddhism, Mahayana, Vajrayana, and Theravada Buddhism. And to quote Ajahn Nisabho quoting Ajahn Sucitto, we have psychology and the Buddha had cosmology. So you can definitely talk about these different realms, the realms of utter bliss and the realms of utter suffering and violence as parts of a human psyche. They're definitely all there, and certainly none of us have seen even a small sliver of that full spectrum, but we've probably all seen enough to be able to definitely be able to at least relate that there is hell on earth, and hopefully you've been able to see or experience that there's also heaven on earth. And the main faith, you'll be happy to hear, the main faith in Theravada Buddhism is not about this. When you come to a thing like this, you don't have to sign anything at the door. Even once you become a monk, we don't sign any waiver. Yes, I believe in heaven. Yes, I believe in XYZ. There's no doctrine that you're signing on to. The basis of faith, the fundamental faith in Theravada Buddhism, is that there is fruit and result to good and bad action. There is fruit and result to good and bad action. And that is a faith. All of us, throughout our lives and the moments of our life, are taking a position about that. Either we believe that we can influence our future, influence our present, by doing wholesome deeds, by being generous, by keeping precepts, having an ethical sense of integrity, by not giving rise to ill will and aversion. But we don't know that's true, and no scientific theorem could completely prove that there is fruit and result to good and bad action. So what we're doing, that first step is, okay, taking it as a working hypothesis. There is fruit and result to good and bad action. That gives us some purchase. We're not totally exposed and vulnerable to fate. We're not totally exposed and vulnerable to some other being's whims and whatever they want for us. We have the capacity to make change in our lives, both for the good and, if we're not paying attention, also in ways that lead to suffering for ourselves and for the people around us. So, yeah, you don't have to believe that, but it's a useful belief to have because it allows you to cultivate habits. Habits in the world. I believe I can become a good piano player. I believe I can speak Thai if I learn and if I put the causes in, then I can speak whatever language I put my put energy into. So there is fruit and result of good and bad action. And yeah, it's just a nice and helpful belief to have. So everything else we talk about today is kind of, it can support that. Because the implications of that, you don't necessarily see that in the world. You see somebody who, even on a huge scale, a multinational scale, an international scale, just being a complete insensitive jerk, someone who just has no loving kindness, is just totally greedy, insensitive, and they just seem like everything's going well for them. So where's the fruit and the result of the good and bad action? Yeah, they're doing bad things and they're getting good results. So what do you say to that, Kovilo? Yeah. So what we're going to talk about kind of is the implications of this. Like, that there are fruits and results. And we do feel that. We do experience that to some extent in the present moment and in the present life. But that's not necessarily the end, according to a theravada view of things. So, yeah, someone, if they are putting in jerky causes, if not in this life, they're going to get jerky results in some future life. And similarly, even if you do all the good stuff, you're just a very generous person, a very loving person, you keep all your precepts, and it seems like nobody trusts you. You've totally turned over a new leaf, but everybody, they still don't trust you, and everything seems to go bad for you. There are good results from those good actions, if not in the present, if not in this life, then in the future. And that's what hells and all these lower realms, the dugatis and the sugati, talk about. So at this point, I'll turn it over Ajahn to talk about hell.
Yeah, we did make a pretty quick decision about who was talking about which. It's true. Longpo Sumedho says that we can think of our mind states as various breeds of dog. You have your inner Chihuahua, your inner kind of huddled in the corner with big eyes. You have your inner Labrador, Great Dane, Rottweiler. And to learn Buddhist cosmology is taking that paradigm of understanding ourselves as an amalgamation of characters, as a whole cosmology in and of ourselves, to a whole nother degree, and infusing it with a pretty ancient wisdom. The Buddhist paradigm for how the world manifests, how this vortex of change and conditions comes into being, is called dependent origination, this web of interpenetrating conditionality arising and ceasing, each of our ripple in touching and affecting the ripple of every other person. And what this results in is a chaotic system. And one element of chaos theory is something called scale invariance, which means that a pattern that repeats at a small level will repeat at every level of zooming out, like a fractal or a Mandelbrot set. So when you see the Buddhist cosmos in stark relief, illustrated through these ancient texts and traditions, and many of these aren't from the Buddha himself. Much of this is commentarial and later treatises, but it adds a color, and there is wisdom in those later thinkers and thoughts. But when you learn that wider scope of the mind, as embodied in these images and stories and characters, you're also learning about how our own psyches manifest on a day-to-day level. Like Ajahn Kovilo said, we've all experienced our own personal hells and heavens, our hungry ghosts, our animal realms, our titans, our gods. And the lowest of those realms, it's funny, many people come to Buddhism because they are thinking that they're escaping kind of an colorful cosmos or vision of the other realms, and little do they know that we have the most colorful cosmos of all. So the lowest realm, the niraya, the hell realms, they're spoken of as states of burning and flame, and of beings, I think in one of the realms, are spoken of as packed as tightly as mustard seeds in a jar. And there's something to that key element of the description of how the hellish mind state bends in and contorts in on itself and finds itself in isolation. This cutting off from others is indicative of the hellish mind state. And some of you will know the quote by Ajahn Punadhammo that I've referenced, where he says, some people will criticize us saying, all you Buddhists talk about is suffering. And you can say, no, we also talk about sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. And this element of despair, you'll see that over time of practice, that word ceases to apply to our experience in the same way. There are still times when things are painful and difficult, and there's still times that are poignant or sorrowful. But there comes a point where that word despair, as embodied in, Othello or these brutal depictions through history and culture of that level of suffering, of that hellish realm, no longer apply. And it's really important to take stock of that because we can become so fixated on how we're still imperfect, how we haven't yet come to a place in our hearts that we would like to. But to notice when that word despair no longer applies, when you've stopped giving your heart completely to the conditioned realm in such a way that you find yourself cast down into those hellish realms from time to time. And people can ask, what's the use of looking to these dark states? We don't enter this path to avoid punishment, or at least that language is so fraught for so many. But it's meaningful to understand how dark the mind can be and to take seriously the implications of practice in brightening the heart and protecting it from those lower states. Because when things are going all right, they might be going all right, but life changes and conditions shift. And to know that you've cultivated an inner refuge such that even if things fall apart, you will not fall with them. An internal refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and practice. That's what we cultivate. And also, because many of us spend a lot of our lives embodying these lower beings. I think many of us wish we could spend more of our time in the angelic realms, but there's a whole family of lower denizens, which many of us find ourselves often living in the realm of. And I think one of the ones which is worth pointing out here, above the hell realm, is that of the hungry ghosts, the petas. And who here has heard of the petas before? The pretas, yes. So many will know these are beings that are often depicted as these ghosts with large bellies. They're always hungry, but these needle-wide mouths, unable to take in the sustenance which they're constantly craving. And the quintessential flavor of the Peta realm is obsession. There's a story of these Thai monks wandering Tudong in Thailand, and they find this little hut where they decide to lay down for the night, and it's night, and it's haunted. And they all lie down, and they're different heights, so their heads are all along a line, but this means that their feet are all out of alignment. And the ghost, wanting to put things in order, pushes their feet all into a line, and then sees that all their heads are out of alignment. So it moves back around and then pushes their heads all into a line, and then their feet are all out of alignment, and then back and forth. And we all know this mind state, this kind of rattling, empty obsession with getting something just right, or moving around a space of depression, of self-recrimination, of doubt, which we've traversed 100 times, but there's something deeply comforting about that same closet which we know so well. Its dusty corners, well-traveled by our fingers and hands. And this is the hungry ghost. And one very interesting thing about the hungry ghost state, this is in the commentaries, but there's a story. There's a husband who is generous and he passes away and is reborn as a tree deva, a tree angel or tree spirit. And then, this is commentarial. And then his wife who passes away, and she was miserly and stingy and is reborn as a preta. And every night she'll come to the tree asking for sustenance and clothing and warmth. And the husband tries to give her these things, but whenever she puts on a garment which he gives her, it turns to a burning hot sheet of metal, and everything he tries to give her to eat begins to burn, and she can't take it in. And after a time, he asks a passing monastic what he should do, and the monastic says, you need to do good, you need to give to either the Sangha or do an act of giving, and then dedicate the goodness to your wife and her state. And so he does, and she's nourished and warmed and heartened. And there's a deep lesson there, where when someone is trapped in this knot of craving, sometimes the means we hope to help them with, giving directly to them, it feeds into that craving complex in such a way that the gift is transmuted into just another aspect of craving or enabling. And perhaps this is most clear in the tragic situation of someone with an addicted family member, where so often the kindness you want to give turns into another kind of means of enabling their addiction. And to know that in those cases there is a place for this oblique approach, where you do goodness, you invite the person along towards a good act, or do something beautiful and pure in their name and let them know. And that there's a beauty and purity to that which does heal and can't be co-opted by that same craving complex. And then there's seeing how this dynamic plays out in a much smaller and more kind of micro aspect with one thing most of us are hungry ghosts for is gain, honor, and praise. And I was talking to a teacher recently, actually Bernadette, who spoke about how when you praise children, you're never supposed to praise their trait. You're never supposed to say, you're so smart. You say, you praise how they're trying to do good. Or the Buddha recommended praising the state of goodness, saying one who, in a different case, engages in generosity finds happiness. Generosity is a state of wholesomeness. And to note how this is the same dynamic played out, that instead of praising someone in a way that will feed that craving, play right into that hungry ghost complex, which we all house in ourselves, to find a way where you're just rejoicing in goodness that you see in an impersonal way, and inviting the other person to rejoice in it as well. And it somehow sidesteps that whole complex of craving and touches something much more pure and impersonal. And this is how you interact with a ghost, is you aim yourself straight at the good and invite them to rejoice in it as well. The dedication of merit is not an esoteric economy. It's rejoicing in goodness and inviting another to rejoice along with you. This is how we interact with our inner ghosts. So,
as Ajahn was describing just how tight the hell realms were, someone's notification on their phone went off. Bing! And I had a very minor insight that some of you might be thinking, oh, it doesn't sound that bad. It doesn't sound that bad. Maybe a little, mustard seed party down there. But there's no Wi-Fi in hell. There's no Wi-Fi in hell. But then the next insight is that there's also no Wi-Fi in heaven, everybody. There's no Wi-Fi in heaven. Isn't that great? You won't be a slave to your phone. Yeah, that was the insight. So there's a Dhammapada verse that says, one should speak the truth, one should not give rise to anger, and one should give, even if one has only a little, to whoever asks. By these three things, one moves in the company of devas, or celestial beings. So that's by telling the truth, honesty, by not giving rise to anger or metta, and by being generous. And these three really sync up with that guided meditation that we were doing. So this area of the brow, the lightness of the brow, one of the reasons that it said that the Buddha had this kind of brightness to his own brow was from never lying. In all these previous lives, he never lied. So he had this light of his brow. And yeah, you can kind of see that in people, trustworthy people. There's kind of there's a brightness in the eyes of people who are long habituated to telling the truth. And with the mouth, this level of friendliness, the smile of someone who doesn't frequently give rise to anger, the metta of someone, like a smile which has divine metta, shades of heavenly kindness. Hopefully all of us have seen smiles like that, and hopefully you can associate in your mind with this quality of not giving rise to anger frequently, and the spaciousness of generosity. So a mother's love, a father's love in a healthy family. Yeah, that's spacious beauty of kindness there. And these are three qualities which devas have in spades beyond human. So the most beautiful light eyes, beautiful eyes that you've seen. Justin Bieber, nothing compared to devas. Beautiful eyes from being honest, from keeping a sense of integrity, from not lying. The smiles and the sense of kindness from not giving rise to anger, that both leads to rebirth in a heaven realm and exceedingly higher heaven realms, but that's how heaven beings interact with each other. There's a story from the commentaries where there's one, so you'll be happy to hear, there are 31 planes of existence, and Ajahn Nisabho, these lower realms, they're just 5, and there's 26 of these higher realms, 26 better and better heaven realms, just like up level, up level, up level. Unfortunately, it is a little bit or a lot bit easier to go down than to go up. But if you're of a habit of doing good, then doing good is easy. And if you're of a habit of being stingy and being mean and, not keeping your sense of integrity, that kind of doesn't go up as much. So, So in this commentarial story, you've got this deva, and so devas, these celestial beings, it literally means the shining ones, or the ones who play, the ones who sport. And in the lower of these 26 higher heaven realms, they are sensual. These celestial beings have celestial pleasures, the most beautiful sights in the universe, the most beautiful and lovely sounds, the best music, the best orchestras, the best smells, everything's super fragrant. None of this like earth nastiness. And it's just all, but it is sensual. So in this story, you've got one deva who's going out in his chariot. They didn't have Ferraris or whatever in the time of the Buddha. But so he goes out in his chariot, and he's got all his nymphs and his posse, and he's going out there, and he's just having fun. Everybody's like, doing whatever. It's been a while. It's been 20 years since I went on a party like this. So, but whatever you guys do when you're off having fun in your chariots, goes off, and this other deva is walking down the road and sees this deva, and he's like, "Come on, haven't you ever been to a party before?" So he's like looking down on this deva. And that's a no-no in heaven. In heaven, when you give rise to anger, it can actually diminish your beauty and lead to spontaneous combustion. Like you're just blown out of the heaven realm. So, but if the second person, so if a deva gives rise to another deva, and that second deva does not return the anger, then that second deva saves them both. Neither one of them spontaneously combust. But if the second deva gives counter anger to that first deva's anger, then both of them out of the heaven realm. And isn't that what it's like? Isn't that what it's like, everybody? We're in our great space, and we're kind, and we're friendly, and then our friend says something a little bit mean, and then we go all hell realm on them. So we can save our friends. Yeah, they call that strength no strength at all, the strength that is the strength of folly. But one who is strong because of their sense of patience, that is true strength. So that's a verse said by a deva. So yeah, patience leads to a heaven realm, the beauty of non-anger. And there's more stories about devas, but I think we're going to have to go back to some lower realms. Time is limited, everybody. But you can still practice, so.
So the mere image of the devas are the asuras. And it's interesting because this cosmology is echoed across cultures. And the Olympiads, or the Olympians of the Greek pantheon, are the equivalent of the Tavatimsa devas of the Buddhist cosmology, and the Titans are the asuras. And these are creatures of anger and violence and power. And what's so interesting is in Buddhist cosmology, you have Mount Sinnaru, which is this giant mountain at the center of all things. And on top of that are the devas. And then under the water at the nadir of the whole pantheon, the asuras live. And they're equally long-lived as the devas and equally as powerful. In fact, they're always kind of going to war. And they think they're in heaven. They think they're in heaven. This is the most interesting part, because this quality of righteous anger, there's no drug as addictive as self-righteous anger, or very few. And how, when you are drunk on that particular beverage or drink or emotion, how it seems so right, correct, that you're in your own kind of divine, righteous place. And only every few thousand years, when this tree in the center of their grove blossoms, do the asuras see that it's not the tree, this kind of beautiful coral flower tree which they used to have. The asuras see it's a different tree, and its blossoms are different. And then they realize that they're not in heaven, and they swarm up the mountain and go to war with the devas, trying to reclaim their place. And isn't this how it goes? Is righteous anger seems so righteous until the fruits come, until you see the blossoming of those actions and the echoes of acting from that place. And I just think that's such a relevant reflection, that the asuras think they're in heaven, and to know that. We have a practitioner in our community who says he has a rule for himself, and that's that if he says to himself a strong view in an argument 3 times in a row, he knows that he's wrong. So if you have that Asura mantra going, knowing, okay, this is delusion, about to suffer, about to suffer. If you're angry, you're deluded at some level. And it doesn't mean that there's not action to be taken from a place of justice, etc., or care, but that anger is always an Asura realm at its heart. Then you have the animal realm, and very variegated. And when the Buddha speaks about the animal realm, he talks about it is as so rare to be reborn in a human realm after falling into a lower realm. It's like a blind turtle coming up in an ocean, and there's a small hoop of wood. And as many times as that blind turtle coming up to the surface every 1,000 years would accidentally poke its head into that ring of wood, that's how often being in a lower realm can ascend to the human rebirth. And we have a monk who makes these, every now and again, these little comics, and there's one where there's this like ocean and this little ring floating on it, and this turtle pokes its head up nearby and says, "Dang it." But also not to lose heart that the path of practice we engage in is so precious and so powerful. And the Buddha says that just as a pinch of salt put in a glass of water would turn the whole water salty, whereas that same pinch of salt put in the Ganges River would barely change the flavor at all. Even so, a bad action manifesting in the constricted mind will change the whole flavor and have powerful result, where a bad action manifesting in a spacious, loving mind infused with practice and care barely has an effect at all. We can affect and change how karma manifests. And to see that, like, we've all done things we regret. But the Buddha says if one dwells in that, thinking, how could I have done that? With self-recrimination, one further darkens that karma. That the proper way to think about past negative action is to say, that was not skillful, and I can't undo what I have done. But that even as a conch blower would make their sound resound in the four directions, even so, in a spacious mind of loving kindness, any limited action of karma does not remain and persist. So you'll notice this, as you become sensitive to negative action, the smallest thing can echo. Maybe you speak a little bit unskillfully and it kind of mars the heart. But to know that as practitioners, sometimes that's the whole of the karma, that's it. You know, maybe there'd be so much more if you were in a constricted heart. But with that bright mind state, maybe that's as much as there is. And to finally just speak about Mara. And some of you know Mara, but he's the king of all the realms. He's a rebel prince in one of the highest heaven realms, so he's not actually part of the lower. But his goal is to keep all beings within his grasp in the sensual realms and to keep from practicing. And what's so interesting about the character of Mara, we asked Ajahn, my teacher, about Mara, and he said, look, Mara is the prideful element in you. It's the part that when someone gives an offering in a monastery wants to be seen by everyone as foremost in giving the offering. And that's the thing, is giving and caring, these are all deva qualities, but even the devas are under Mara's sway. So to note that when we do good, to watch for Mara, and he'll always be there in the sidecar until we've achieved enlightenment, but to watch that and to bend the other way, to go against the stream. So if you have a gift you want to give to a monastic or someone else in your life, can you give the gift to someone else to give with you, or can you give as a group? Can you, as Ajahn Kovilo said last session, can you put gold on the back of the Buddha statue? And can you do good in quiet? When you want to be in the foreground, can you step to the back? And this is the way we turn Mara's barb into something else. And to note that impulse towards pride and the Lord of the sensual realms, and to step into humility and the majesty that rests behind that. Ajahn, do you want to finish any more heaven story? You don't have to.
Yeah, it turns out it takes more than half an hour to describe all of heaven and earth. So maybe we can just leave it there, but just to summarize all of that, another Dhammapada verse is that if by seeing a greater or a more subtle or a more refined happiness or pleasure, by relinquishing a lesser happiness or pleasure, the wise person would relinquish that lesser pleasure, that lesser happiness, looking towards the higher happiness, the higher pleasure. And so, yeah, looking towards this, the happiness, the joy, the pleasure even of a mind which is virtuous, a mind which is loving, not easy to anger, and a mind which is generous. These are heavenly qualities on earth. And hopefully if you don't yet see them in yourself, hopefully other people see them in you. And we can all grow in these. It is possible to abandon the unwholesome and to cultivate the wholesome. And there is fruit and result of good and bad actions. So with that in mind, let's all cultivate the good. And heaven is great, but Nibbana is even better. And we might have to leave that for another week. But just keep heading in the direction of heaven, and Nibbana has some of that flavor, although a lot better. Okay.
Handamayang Dhammakataya Sadhu Karang Dadamase Sadhu 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 Anumodami.
We have time for questions and discussion. If people want to raise their hand, we'll run the mic over to you, Miles. And if you're on Zoom, raise your electronic hand.
Thank you both for a lovely talk. I really appreciated it. Ajahn, Nisabho, you mentioned about having regrets, and then you did a bunch of talking, and it was great. But can you dumb it down for me a little bit? So we have a regret. Then what? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So the Buddha, or wholesome remorse, is okay in a Buddhist framework, and it falls or can fall roughly under the umbrella of hiriyottapa, or conscience and concern, the sense that an action wasn't worthy of our highest goals, and that disjoint between our action and aspiration. But the Buddha, the sense of guilt and self-recrimination and self-flagellation, that's what the Buddha really spoke about moving beyond. And I think a Buddhist sense of self-forgiveness it rests in a sense of loving kindness and in a sense of our understanding of our own conditionality. Just given our condition, given the amount of skillful qualities we had at that time, given the amount of ignorance, of course we acted the way we did. And there's a sense of forgiveness in that. And of course we want to do better in the future, but understanding our own conditionality and the forgiveness that hides in that. But also the Buddha in that particular sutta is just speaking about, and you'll see this like when there's that sense of disappointment or regret or guilt, it's a bruise that kind of moves down the body. Like we all know that feeling of like, why did I do that? And there's this sense of kind of reacting or struggling or just trying to move that process more quickly. And my sense is often you can't rush it. You have to let the bruise kind of move through you. But you will notice that as the mind becomes more spacious, like Ajahn Kovilo was speaking about, and infused with metta, then in that sutta, the Buddha's acknowledging that spacious mind, you will find that stuff just sticks less. Like the bruise moves through you, and you can commit to doing better in the future, but you can also just have a sense of humor about the whole thing. And we're just kind of broken, silly people. We're all kind of 5-year-olds trying to pretend to be adults together. And I really think noticing and taking heart in how much more quickly those echoes fade. And yeah, the Buddha does not support kind of chewing over again and again those past bad actions. That doesn't help. So the Buddha says, one who acknowledges a fault and determines restraint in the future grows in the Dhamma. So.
Hi, I just wanted to share this. Well, while you were doing the metta meditation at the end, I had to change, may all beings, or whatever, the outward, may everyone be safe and happy. And I thought, well, may I offer goodwill so that I have a more active role in that. So that just came to mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. That's great. May I offer goodwill, to all beings. That's really beautiful because it is, people, even if before you knew about Buddhism, you probably would have heard the word karma and might not have any idea actually what it means. It seems like an esoteric doctrine, but karma is just the Sanskrit word, the Pali being kama, for action. And the Buddha said, what is karma? What is action? It's intention. So it's all about the intentions that we put forth in practicing metta at that kernel level. May I give goodwill, or that's really beautiful. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you.
The sort of idea of the proper way to think about our past negative actions, I was thinking about that. And what I sort of took from it was that we think about the proper way to think about our past negative actions is that, I think you said something along the lines of, I have done wrong, but the wrong that I've done because my mind is spacious, because I'm a practitioner, the karma is so small that it's already purified, or something along those lines. I'm misquoting a little bit, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that, maybe go a little deeper on that.
Yeah, in that sutta, it's called the conch blower. The Buddha says, if one continues to, I think it's kind of obsess about past negative action, it is a cause for more rebirth in the hell realm. Whereas one should reflect, that was not skillful and I can't undo what I have done. And then he says that when one then develops this mind of loving kindness, that's spacious and wide, this is the heaven realms that Ajahn Kovilo didn't get to speak to, are these Brahma realms, which are states of light and space. And that when one's mind is spacious like that, then just as then any negative limited karma will not persist there. And what I take that to kind of indicate is, one takes seriously one's past actions and tries to grow from them, but knowing that as you create this spacious mind and brighten the heart, that you will find those actions just stick around less. And I find it's important because when we talk about these lower states, even in a metaphorical way, let alone a literal, it really can be frightening. And people can grab onto that in a very negative way and think, oh my God, I am in bad, this is not going to go well for me, like I've done some bad stuff. And I find it so heartening that the Buddha said that yes, we've all done such a mix in our past, but that if you cultivate the broad, bright heart now, then things, the old karma doesn't have to manifest in that way, not as strongly. And I just think of this as like, when you practice, your sense of, when you lose your alignment with the Dhamma becomes very viscerally apparent, and a small action can really stick with you in a way that maybe it wouldn't have even registered. But that this is actually, often maybe you might not have been aware of that misstep in the past, but maybe it would have had real implications. Maybe the relationship would have gone sour over time. Whereas now, maybe you really feel regret, but maybe that's the whole of the karma of it, is that sense of oh, that really hurt, I don't want to do that again. And so I think this is a really lovely thing for the Buddha to give us, is a pinch of salt in the Ganges, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, just to say in general, we can't just will ourselves to have faith in something, or at least I can't. I wasn't raised in a Buddhist family. I wasn't raised in a Christian family. So it wasn't coming from a place of automatic belief in heaven or hell or any of this stuff. And yeah, I do believe that the Buddha taught heavens and hells. You read the suttas and yeah, it's a really baked in part of that. But it's certainly not the beginning. And for most weeks, most of my Buddhist practice is not believing intently about heavens and hells. It's watching my breath, it's stilling my body, it's trying to be a nice person, it's keeping my precepts. And you know what I can believe in is beauty. And it's not even a belief. You know, there are academic circles that talk about, you know, the relativity of beauty, which is true. Different cultures have different beauty norms. Moral relativity, different cultures have different morals. But I can see, and I don't know about you, but like there is an ugliness of an angry face. I haven't been to every country, but it seems cross-cultural, and there is a beauty to a friendly, kind face, a forgiving face. There is an ugliness to a stingy heart that just lies about what they have, and there is a beauty to a open-handedness, and I can believe in that because it's not even, I see it in other people, and when you live around, I mean, this is like, you know, as close on the human realm, there are so many beautiful people here doing a lot of good deeds. People come here to be at their best, and you live at these monasteries and everybody's just on their best behavior, and just we've been living in these such privileged spheres for 15 plus years, and privileged in the sense of we're meeting kind, generous, ethical people all the time. And even if that's not baked into who they are, all of us want to be more kind. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and you just look around. We'll have a potluck in a bit, and you can just look around and see all the beauty around you. But just wanted to say that if you can't believe in heavens and hells, just can you believe in beauty and see that?
Yeah, and just to say that, like Ajahn Kovilo says, this is a really useful language for our own hearts. Like just being like, learning the tone of your asura, your inner hungry ghost, your inner kind of deva. They'll usually have different tones of voice. You'll know their feel, and your face will change. Ajahn Kovilo and I decided that when we ever disagree on something, we need to take pictures of each other's faces so we can see our asura faces. So,